friends, welcome back to my channel. I hope you've been enjoying the videos I've been creating lately. It's been a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot. I'm excited to share more. And so here we are with a new quilt, another fall quilt that I've been working on. Like I mentioned before, I'm working on 2 quilts this season to kind of spruce up my living space, to add more color, fall, jewel tones to the living room, and I'm really enjoying it. So today I have a different quilt for you. The last video was about this one here. It's the Patchy Pumpkin Form Quilt. I love it, and I'm keeping it there to display for a little while longer. And today I have the Stratus Quilt. And this one is designed by Homemade Emily Jane. She's got a blog and a website where you can purchase her quilt patterns. And then she's got an Instagram where I follow, and maybe more, but those are the places where I follow her. And she's a good friend. She's very sweet, and she's got great designs. So I am working today on this quilt. I'm going to show you what I've been doing. I have a whole stack here of some blocks that are already assembled and show you how I made them. So I have the last little bit here on my desk to show. This is a really fun, and I would say a beginner's quilt. Anybody can do it with no experience or little experience, because it's just that easy while still giving a lot of interest. So one thing that I learned, and this is really different than the style that I'm used to, I learned how to make an improv block. And if you're not familiar with improv, it is a sort of free-flowing quilting style. And I typically don't go with improv, and I think that's, I think it's a more sophisticated and maybe modern way of saying patchwork and random patchwork. So it is a little free-flowing, but there are parameters, and that's what I like about this quilt. It's still very organized within squares. I like that. I like to have neat little squares and blocks to work off of. Too much improv is not very good for me. It's just not my style, and I don't really enjoy that. I like to have a direction that I'm going in. So with this quilt, I felt like it met both of those standards. It introduced me to improv, and it has me making it organized on the quilt. So what I decided to go with was the ombre design effect in this quilt, and I'm gonna have my lightest at the top cascading down to a darker, and even you know what, it's not even, now that I think of it, it's not just going to be darker at the bottom. It's going to go through color changes. So you can see here on this tray, I've got the creams, a little bit of added peach in there, and a little bit of other colors just to add some interest. And then I've got these peachy pinks, and then these pinks and rust colors, and then the rust and pumpkin colors. And then at the very bottom, I will be having a mix of pumpkin and these yellow orange tones. And I think it's gonna look really nice. So yeah, it will be changing as the quilt goes from the top to the bottom. I really like that. I've done an ombre quilt in the past, and I thought it was really pretty, and it had similar colors to this, and it was a big hit on Instagram, and I'm really excited to try it again. That quilt is now living at my mom's house, and she snatched that up as soon as I was done. So this one will be for me. And so let's get started. Once you have all your fabrics figured out and planned, and I would suggest planning out your fabrics in the order you want them. That way when you're cutting, keep them right next to each other. You don't have to align them later on. That's a big help. But with this pattern, I had noticed that while cutting was a lot of fun, there were some hiccups that I had later on in the quilt. So I am going to demonstrate how I had cut mine in the pattern. Now I'm not going to give the measurements because I believe that would mess with the integrity of the quilt pattern that Emily put together. She put a lot of work into it, and I don't want to take anything away from her quilt pattern. So I don't want to give away the exact measurements. I know people are out there looking for tips, and they might just take the measurements and make it themselves without ever buying the pattern. Definitely go check out the pattern. buy it. It's a good one, and you will definitely learn how to assemble this even better. But I do want to point out that in the pattern, the measurement for the fabric that was recommended came out just a little short, and it was with the strips. So part of improv is the fun of free flow cutting, not going with an exact pattern. And Emily does give instructions on that. But since there are varying widths from one end to the other, while assembling the quilt blocks, I had noticed you can see much thicker and more narrow on this end, and they are all different sizes. So you can see that. I had noticed that while putting it together, the recommended length just came short on some of the strips, especially since they are different widths. Once you sew them and then press them, they're going to come out a little wonky, which is the whole point, and that's all the fun, is the wonky strips. But I'm going to demonstrate for you what I came across and what I would recommend instead. So I got the thicker and the thinner side lined up here, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam very quickly here. I've got my whole setup here on my desk. I love having everything here available to me right on my work surface. I've got my sewing machine, my tools. I've got my stitching press here on the table. It is a mini ironing board that I do offer in my Etsy shop. And I've got my mini iron, my spray bottle, and I even have my mini cutting mat. I don't need this here since I have my large one, but I do use this 5.5 inch ruler. Really handy, especially for this pattern. All right, so let me put this aside, and then I got another seam to do. So what's recommended in this quilt pattern is that you pair up your fabrics 2 by 2, and it really is the best way to do it. You can do an entire row, piecing them all together at once, but 2 by 2 gives you a better idea of how the fabric is laying out whenever you put it all together. And I would definitely do that as Emily recommends. So we're gonna see here, these fabrics were all cut with the recommended length, but even here you can see that they've shifted. So this back piece is going much further than the light peach. So I'm gonna press them here on my mat. And I've mentioned before, I don't like having my huge ironing board out. This little this little stitching board, I'm sorry, it's called a stitching press. I made the name, I should know it. This little stitching press is a lifesaver for me. It keeps my surfaces protected. It's just the right size for block making. And I don't have to bring out my large ironing board until later on in the process. So that saves me a lot of time and from bumping into it, right? Does anyone else have that problem? I'm always walking around the sewing room, or sometimes I would even have to put it in the living room because I just didn't have the space in here. And I hate lugging that thing around and having that in the way for weeks on end while I put together the quilt blocks. This saves me some extra space. So, okay, here we go. So you're going to see whenever you put just 2 of the strips together that it already changes the shape. And you can see this one's pretty rectangular, pretty even on both ends. And not all the strips are like that. So this one's a little wonkier, and you can see it's even tilting to the side. So whenever you put them together, it might shift even more. And I'm trying to line these up as best I can. But of course, it's not going to. They are wonky strips for a reason. And the shorter ones are the recommended length from the pattern. The longer ones, I extended the length once I realized, oh, this is going to be a problem whenever I'm sewing them together. So I'll show you what I was running into whenever I was assembling these. And you know, it's not like it's the quilt pattern designer's fault. The fabric is going to shift. It just is. That's part of improv, is having different changes within the pattern and within the fabric and letting it do its thing. But with this, we do need specific measurements for this pattern, so what I did, because I realized that this was happening quite a bit, and whenever I was cutting the smaller blocks, this size here, whenever I was cutting these out, some of these pieced panels were not reaching. I wasn't able to get 2 full blocks out of it, and that was really frustrating. So I had about 2/5 of the fabric just left over scrap, and I was throwing them into the scrap bin over and over, and I was like, ooh, I'm wasting a lot of fabric. So you can see here, this right here, this one with the little black design, this one was the recommended length, and it was cutting short on certain blocks, not all of them. On certain panels like this one, it was coming short, and then I wasn't able to get the full 5, or I'm not supposed to tell you the measurement. I wasn't able to get the full block sizes out of it. So that was really frustrating. I would recommend going an extra inch further than what the recommended length is on the pattern. An extra inch further is going to make sure that if it does shift like mine did, mine are very extreme. I went the smallest measurement to the largest on a lot of my fabrics, and so it is an extreme difference, and that might happen with you. So put on an extra inch onto your strips whenever you're cutting them, and it's going to save you that frustration, so you don't have as much scrap as I did. And some of them I was able to kind of refurbish or I was able to add on to the end. Like I would take out the seam here and then add a little strip, and then that just came right out, and then sew it back together. But I wasn't going to do that to all of them because that was just going to take way too much time. So yeah, save yourself that little frustration and just add an extra inch to the pattern. It's going to help you out in the long run. Okay, so now that we have these panels here, I'm going to cut some of my squares out just like I did with these other stacks here. And there were a lot of squares that I needed. I saw Emily's quilt all assembled, and for whatever reason it still didn't strike me how many squares I was going to need. I need a lot. I need about 120 of these for my throw quilts that I'm making. So that's a lot. That's a lot of these. And it's honestly, I'm really excited. It's going to look beautiful because there's so many different fabrics, so many different colors in this, and it's just going to be great. So I've got my little ruler here on the table, and I'm going to trim some of these out. You can pile them up. I wouldn't do more than two panels at a time because there are so many seams, and I try to reserve my blade as long as possible. I always retract it every time I use it, so don't worry, I'm not gonna I didn't just almost cut myself. It is retracted back in. But with this step, you do have to be accurate, and it comes out so nice and clean. See that? So 120 of these, that's what I need. I'm gonna finish cutting these. I've got all my pumpkin and yellows here in this last batch. So I'm gonna have these all lined up, and then we will lay them out here on my design wall. Hello, so we're back, and it's actually the next day. I look completely different. Last night, whenever I finished my pumpkin and yellow, gold maybe, blocks, I was tired. The kids needed a little extra snack before bed, so I wasn't able to come back. But I am here with all the blocks all ready, and you can see the order that they're going to be in here. I've got my design wall ready to go ahead and start placing everything. And I even have a large stack of sashing strips and the fabric that I'll be using for the sashing. I've got a little bit left over. This is the Artiste design fabric from Hobby Lobby that I saw. I've been loving their whole collection with the cute little sewing notions, and so I saw the fabric and I decided to buy it for this project. It is beautiful, and I hope that it works out for the sashing. I've been wondering if maybe, I know that the cream will be fine. I've been wondering if these little bouquets of flowers are going to be okay in the sashing. We'll see how that comes out. But overall, I'm pretty confident it'll be fine. So I've got this all ready and I'm gonna start placing it on the wall. I am going with like an ombre effect, even though the yellow is coming through after the rest. So the darkest color is not gonna be at the very bottom. It is gonna be somewhere about 2/3 of the way down. And there are many ways that you can do an ombre effect. So I've seen some people do the top left corner going down to the other bottom right corner. I've seen them do from one side to the other and top to bottom, of course. I've even seen some designs with the center going out to the edges on all sides. There are many variations of the ombre effect, but I'm gonna go with the top corner going down to the bottom corner. And I like that look. I've done that before and I think it came out really nice. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. And I'm gonna place these on the wall. I'm gonna do it with a time lapse, so my behind's not, you know, showing the whole entire time, and so it doesn't take too long, but that's what I'm gonna be doing. Okay, so I am all done with my layout. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It turned out even better than I expected. And I know that I had a lot of cream colored blocks, but now that I see it on the wall, there is a lot more than I had expected because the change is very, very gradual. So you can see at the top up here that the blocks are mostly cream or beige colored, and they just have little tiny flecks of color. There's black, there's a little bit of peach and like light browns. So the change is super gradual, and then here it just gives a pop of color. And it comes on pretty strong here, and then it goes into the yellow. So it's not really an ombre, it's more like a gradient warm tone quilt, I guess you could say. And I like it. I like it a lot. I'm wondering how this sashing is going to look in between, because it is a little darker than the creams that I have on this fabric. It's just slightly darker, but then it's lighter than these tones. So I'm wondering how that's even going to come out. What do you think? Kind of blends in. Ooh. Do I want it to blend in? Uh-oh. I hope that works out. Let me see. I did want something that wasn't going to be too stark of a contrast, because I considered putting white in between as a sashing, and I just felt like, no, I do a lot of white. I'm always working with white. So I thought this would be nice. It is a darker, the lighting is pretty strong right here. It is a darker cream, more like a wheat color. And it does have these bunches of flowers. So like I said earlier, I'm a little concerned about these flowers. I'm hoping that they don't completely blend in with the blocks that I have. And then also this, I picked up the tones from this fabric for the squares, but there are these little tiny blooms of blue, and I think they're gonna look really cool. They'll either look really cool or they'll completely ruin the quilt. So it's a gamble at this point. It's a gamble. And now that I'm looking at this on camera, I can kind of see that it camouflaged in between. So that's gonna be fun. Maybe not what I had expected or wanted, but that's how it's gonna go, because that's what I got. And I already cut up lots of strips of this. Yeah, we're gonna see how this works out. It's not going as planned. It's kind of a bummer. But I love the colors. Maybe I should just switch it up right now and just do like an off-white. Darn it. I hate switching my plans whenever I've already cut the fabric. That would be such a waste, right? Such a waste of this pretty fabric. Oh well, I'm going with it. It's gonna be a very interesting quilt. We'll see how it turns out. So it does, it kind of blends in. Well, look, it does look good here against the rest, right? We'll see. We'll see how it's gonna come out. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna add the sashing, and I've got these little strips here, and these go right in between, and we're gonna sew row by row. Look at that, it just completely camouflages in. I'm kind of nervous about it now. Maybe I should have thought this out a little better. Yeah, I'm gonna add these small sashing strips, and I've got a lot of these. I think there are like 108 or something. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add the small sashing in between each square in rows, and then I'm gonna add the long sashing pieces between the horizontal rows, and that's how we piece it all together. Okay, so what I'm doing is I stacked up the first row. I took the first row down, and I have them all in order of how they came off of the wall. And so the first one has this, sorry, I'm making sure that I have the right direction. The first one has this horizontal line, and the rest, this is the last one of the row. There are 10 pieces in each row. So I gotta make sure that I put them in the right order, that I don't mess it up, because I can very easily forget my place, especially when you're sewing and it's very monotonous and your mind kind of blanks because you're just doing the same thing over and over. So I got to make sure that I keep it in the right order, and that I am only putting these tiny sashing pieces in between the quilt. None of them are going to go on the outside edge, not on that side or that side. So I got to make sure that I'm putting them on the right side. I'm going to be pinning these together because I don't want them to shift. These are cut to the exact size of each square, and it's very easy that when you're going through the machine quickly that they'll shift just a little bit. So I'm going to be doing that with this quilt, especially since there's no wiggle room. It's cut to the exact size, and we're not trimming these after. So whenever stacking, I do try to make sure that I keep them the directional way that I pulled them down. And I'm only going to do one row at a time, because if I pull all of these down, I will confuse myself, and that's just me. If you're comfortable, you know, lining them up a certain way where you remember, do that and save time. But I'm going to pull them down one by one because, like I said, my mind kind of blanks once I'm sewing. I'm just in the mode, and I will completely forget how to line them up. So I don't want to do that, especially because I'm on camera right now. All right, so I just tested my first row, and it came out really nice. You see the darker side here, the lighter side here, and it's actually going to go this way on the quilt, like this. As you can see behind me, it matches perfect. There we go. So it's all in order, and each piece is directional. So this side is going horizontally, and then this side is going vertically. And it is running a pattern throughout the whole row. So it came out pretty good. Now you can see, just at a glance, you can see very quickly that the sashing here at the top with the light cream fabrics is very obviously showing in between the blocks. But then as you kind of get into more color, it just blends in completely. So yeah, it's really scrappy quilt. It's got a lot of movement to it, and this sashing is really just blending in. We'll see how it comes out once the horizontal lines are in there, because it might pull those colors out a little bit more, or it might not, and it might completely camouflage in this quilt. So I'm gonna see. I'm still going with it. I'm still happy with that fabric. If I could go back, would I choose a different one? Probably, but I'm going with it now. So it sounds like Sounds like the puppy's out there trying to come in the room. Can you hear it whining? All right, so I do have a couple tips on how to assemble the rows now that I've done one. My mistake was definitely snipping in between each seam. So what I mean by that is my machine has a little snipping button, and after I attached one block to the sash, I snipped the fabric. I snipped the chain instead of leaving it long and allowing it to run through the entire row. I would definitely recommend not snipping in between each block and just keeping it all chain pieced together. That's going to keep your fabrics in the right direction and in the right order. Because after I took my little pile and ran it through, ran over the seams with the press, I did lose the direction that I had my blocks in, so I had to reorder them. That just takes way too much time. We don't want to waste time doing those things. If you're taking down your fabric in a pile in the right order, then it's going to stay that way whenever you chain piece it. All right, I hope you guys are able to see that on the machine. It's a little bit low. So here we are. I've got my entire row chain pieced, and that's helping me keep them in order so I don't lose my place again. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna press them already pieced. And this doesn't always work for every quilt because some of the blocks are too big sometimes, but these are nice and small, so it's gonna be easy to press and to keep them in order. So while I do this, I want to make sure not to pull them out. I did go ahead and do a back stitch on every single end so that it's not pulling apart. Now the thing is that these smaller squares, these are not double stitched on the end. So while my sashing is, the rest of it isn't. Still have to be really careful whenever we're moving our quilt top around because of that reason. And that is because whenever I was sewing the strips together to make the blocks, trimmed down the pieces to the size that it says on the pattern. And whenever you trim down, you get rid of that edge. So even if you do back stitch, whenever you are assembling those pieces, it's probably going to get trimmed off. So just be really careful whenever you're handling the entire quilt top for that reason. This quilt, right now I was listening to the Pocahontas soundtrack. I love that soundtrack, but these colors just totally remind me of that movie for some reason, and they're very fall and nature-like. So I was listening to that soundtrack while I was working, and I love it. I can listen to that soundtrack forever. It's got such beautiful music and a really good storyline. If you like that soundtrack too, let me know. I am a big fan of musicals and theater plays. I love them. Ever since I was a kid, we would take field trips to the theater with my schools, and I did grow up in the San Diego area, so there's lots of art and museums and theaters there, and we would get to go there on field trips. It was awesome. I remember going to Disneyland one year, and it was during the time that they were showing the Pocahontas play there at Disneyland, and that was really cool. It was a short little show. It was a short show, but I loved it. I still remember that day. Really beautiful music. And these colors are definitely reminding me of that movie, and the dress that they were wearing in those scenes is beautiful. So now that these are all put together, I can just go ahead and overlap them like they're going to, in the direction that they're going to go on my quilt. So that way I'm not losing their place. And this one, the first one goes vertically. So I'm going to go ahead and sandwich this one on top, and then I can snip them. See, I'm still able to keep them in order. Before it was like, oops, which way does this one go? And what do I do now? So to keep them in order, I'm just gonna lay them there, and I'll grab 2 at a time, 2 little blocks at a time, and then I am gonna keep them pieced. That way I don't lose their order again. All right, so I'm gonna leave that there. And these 2 I'm gonna cut off. And so, let me see. So that's 2, and then 3 is going to be vertically. All right. Yeah, this is much easier. Last time I lost my place and I was like, ah, so frustrating. There's a lot of power in that machine. All right, so every other one is going to be vertical. This quilt is really perfect for beginner and someone that's not used to improv sewing. I like that it's kind of a organized chaos in this quilt, and it's very easy to put together because whenever you're cutting the strips, they cut so quickly. You don't have to measure every single little, you know, millimeter. It's gonna be just fine whenever you're cutting them loosely. And then whenever you're sewing, it comes together even faster. I would say this is the more, this is the stage where you really have to pay attention, and the rest of it was just so easy. So then we got another, yep, it's gonna be vertical again. And then, oh, look what I did. I added sashing to the last piece. You're not supposed to add sashing to the last piece, and I don't know why I forgot that. I'm probably gonna have to remind myself after every row not to add the sashing there, because you just get going and then you forget, right? All right, so let me just take this one out real quick. And this is the last piece of the row. So you can see that it is coming out pretty quickly. The row is just about done. Okay, so I've got 2 pressed here, and I'm gonna lay it out so that they're in order the whole time. The first block up there is going horizontally, and then this second row is starting with a vertical. So that's a good reminder. So I have it there, I'm not gonna get confused. And then I can lay this one next to it, and then I'm just gonna continue going down the row. So now, these 2 are next. And I can still see how they are in order. That's great. All right, much better than my first attempt with the row. It's kind of funny that one of my memories is with the Pocahontas play, because whenever I was younger, I did not like that movie. It was not even my top 5 Disney movies, and I was a Disney fanatic. And for whatever reason, I didn't like it. I think I just didn't understand what they were really talking about, you know, as a child. It's kind of a more serious topic, right? That Pocahontas movie, a little bit more mature. And so I didn't really fully understand it. But the other day I watched the movie with the girls, and I was just, I love it more as an adult now, because I feel like I understand a little bit more of what they were even talking about, and the message in the songs. It's really beautiful, beautifully well put together. We've also been learning a lot about the explorers and the settlers, conquistadors in our history lessons with The Good and the Beautiful. So I feel like it's been fresh on my mind, and I'm able to look back on history a little different now that I understand more, you know, being a mom and the way the world has been lately. So yeah, it's been something that I've really been enjoying myself, and I was happy to watch it with the girls. That, and in the movie, the voice for John Smith is Mel Gibson, and I just love that actor. He's one of my favorites, and I would say that it's probably one of my favorites now that I fully understand the movie. But as a kid, no, I was all about Little Mermaid. So I was born in '88, so that's right around the time when those originals were coming out. And I have memories of sitting down and watching Little Mermaid over and over and over and over. I just loved it. right, so here we are. I'm gonna start putting the blocks together 2 by 2, and they are in order, so it's gonna go much quicker now. So I'm gonna snip that and then open it up and add the next piece before pressing, because I have a good understanding of how it's laying out now. And most of the block is already, I do like to make sure that these are lined up so that the row doesn't get crooked whenever I iron it out later. So there we go. All right, and then got this one. Yeah, so I think it is smart for me to only go row by row. If I pull them all down, I would be very confused right now. There are so many blocks, 120 blocks. So you don't want to get those mixed up. Otherwise, you'll be laying it out over and over and over, trying to figure out which way they go again. At least I would, because I am pretty forgetful whenever I'm here at the sewing machine. I don't know why. It just happens. And this row is almost done. So all I have to do is one more seam, and then I'm going to press it out. And they come together pretty quickly. This whole quilt could honestly be done in maybe a week because of how quickly it comes together. And then I would definitely say again, it's beginner friendly, or even improv beginner friendly. It's really popular right now to have improv quilts. I'm seeing a lot of projects on Instagram, very, very loosely sewn together and not planned out very much. And it's so amazing and beautiful to me. I do think I need a little more structure and instruction because I'm pretty sure I would just ruin my fabric. But some of those improv quilters, they're just amazing. It's really beautiful works of art. So here's our second row. And I would say that that was pretty successful. It went much easier than the first time, the first go around. And looking pretty good. Still can't see that sashing over here. Oh well, it's just how it's gonna be. So I'm gonna put the rest of these rows together. I predict that it's gonna go together pretty quickly. There are 12 rows, so that's quite a bit of sewing. Sewing this, I'm gonna go ahead and listen to more Pocahontas, and maybe you'll listen to it too while you're doing your fall sewing with all these beautiful earthy tones. All right, as you can see, I am zooming through these rows now, and I feel like I have a pretty good rhythm now. I am noticing a few things though. Whenever I am assembling these, because I'm moving them so much, these vertical, let me show you, these vertical blocks, the ones going up and down, they're not being sewn into the sashing yet. So they are being moved around quite a bit, and depending on how long you're going to keep your blocks around before assembling the whole quilt, it could be a while, depending on your schedule and if you're moving them around a lot or not. And I'm noticing with just the little handling that I've been doing that these vertical blocks are beginning to fray at the end and come undone. That's a little scary. You don't want your blocks coming apart, especially since they're only a small size. There is a possibility of it just coming undone whenever you're holding your whole rows, and then we'll be manipulating them even more as we add on the horizontal rows. So if you know that you're not going to be able to get to it right away, I would suggest going over these lines maybe with an 1/8 of an inch seam, just so that it doesn't come apart before you can actually put the whole thing together. It would be horrible if you had to wait, a couple weeks, couple months before you get to the blocks to finish your quilt top, and then they come apart. That would be really sad. So there's a little tip. If you're going to be handling them a lot, go ahead and add a tiny little seam at the top to keep them in place. 1/8 of an inch will keep them where they should be, and it'll also not be visible whenever you do put your sashing on. So just a little tip there, and I am getting through these rows pretty quickly. I'm really happy with it. I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. So that's pretty good. 5 more.